What's good? Thanks for clicking on the blog again. I got another book review. This one is the Autobiography of Martin Luther King. And yeah, this is just a great book. I mean, a lot of us do know about Martin Luther King. You definitely got a street named after him in your city, especially if you're in, the big cities, Chicago, LA, New York, any place like that. You definitely have heard about Martin Luther King and you know his impact as a civil rights, or maybe you don't. I went to a public school and they didn't really teach us much about it. Like, I remember we talked about the Montgomery boycotts. We know about Rosa Parks, but there's just details and stuff that are in this book that you don't really get in a regular setting, or at least in a fast-paced setting. I was in a public school with like 40 to 45 kids to the one teacher, and that was through all 7 periods. So I know the attention to detail didn't really sit well with at least people in my grade, in my class. So maybe this video will get you introduced to Martin Luther King and all the stuff that he actually did. One of the things that I found as a extraordinary fact was that the Montgomery boycotts lasted over a year. It lasted like 381, 82 days or something like that. Like, what the hell? Like, in high school, the teacher pretty much went into it, said that this is what they did, and it worked, and that was pretty much it. And I was someone who paid attention. I got an A, but I guess that fact went over my head at some point. It was the organized way they had to come together at that point is really how they achieved it. They didn't just go to march and then that was it. Like, it was work. And one thing that was really important about the boycott was when Rosa Parks sat in on the bus. It wasn't a planned stunt at all by any means, even though she was a secretary for the NAACP and people didn't know that. But it was one of those days where she was just tired of that shit, and it just seemed like a really good time to like zone in on an issue. And that was really what Martin Luther King learned in that first one, was you couldn't scatter. You can't be marching and sitting in, and you had to really just go after one issue at a time. And the system wanted you to spread out all your resources to try to fight everything, but Martin Luther King, I think that's what he really grasped from that one episode, was that anytime something happened, you had to zone in on the issue. You had to like conduct these so that there was kind of like a cause and effect, where you had the bus situation, or you had the Freedom Riders, or you just had certain instances where there was a target where the entire world could put their eyes on, because you can't really cover all the bases in every city and every slum, but you can put coverage on certain things where the whole world is watching, and you're putting kind of like democracy like in the light, at least the democracy that they kind of wanted at that time. And then another thing is, people don't realize this wasn't that long ago. A lot of people want to say forget slavery. They want to say they don't, get over it. You weren't part of slavery, that type of shit. You do not realize that Jim Crow laws pretty much went all the way into like the 1960s. Like, that's crazy to think. Like 60, 80 years ago, less than 100 years ago, there was still separation between whites and blacks. And another thing that needed to be noted in that in the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, all of the marches that were conducted by Martin Luther King and his associates, and the SLCL. If you read the book, you'll know he was part of certain unions, he was part of certain councils, and they really wanted to zone in on certain issues so that it wasn't assimilated too quickly. Because if you desegregated too quickly, it would be that blacks would end up not having any power at all. So like, there were certain communities that were already thriving, and this goes back to, this triggers, no pun intended, an excerpt from Killer Mike's Trigger Warning, where he actually talks about how his grandfather owned land, and that the communities, you go to the person you buy the fruit from, that person comes to you for vegetables or something, I don't know, and vice versa. Like, if you do mechanics, then you go get your haircut over here, and the guy with the haircut who owns that shop, he goes into your mechanic store to get his car fixed. So there was communities that were thriving off of this. So a lot of the movement of where it was desegregating too fast, they were seeing people relying on white men too much, and where the money was not circulating in their own community anymore, and was really breaking down situations. Or maybe, you know, a fire department had to desegregate and go with another fire department, or a police department, and then so you were the head of your department, you were the chief, and then when you come over here, the white guy ends up getting the chief position, and you have to be, you know, first lieutenant or something. And this is the instances of where they were just kind of like didn't want to assimilate too fast, because you don't want the power. You want the power to be evenly given out. You don't want it to be wrongfully distributed, because then you're just in the same cycle. But another thing about Martin Luther King and his movement was actually that's when the Black Power like scenario went. And I always thought Black Power came from the Black Panther movement and such, but really it strung about in this way during their march, because and actually Martin Luther King was not ready to claim that as a slogan. His slogan at that point was freedom now. So there was actually a divide that they didn't want the government to see amongst the people marching, where some people were shouting and chanting Black Power, and some people were against it, saying freedom now, because they wanted to be more inclusive. Freedom now, people wanted the whites in the group to walk and march, and some people felt like that wasn't their march, that wasn't their walk. So when you're reading it, you're really getting a glimpse on like all of the insides and how organized they had to be. They couldn't, I mean, to organize getting to work and such for a whole year, that's insane. Like, these guys came up with carpools, and they you know, did like taxi service deals. And then when the city took that away, they said, oh, you have to charge a minimum fee. So then they were like just proud to walk. Like, people were coming and like trying to pick up old ladies, like, hey, get in the car, I'll give you a ride to your place, if they saw them walking with groceries. Like, being very neighborly, very communal. And some of those people would say, nah, like, I'm walking for my grandkids, I'm not walking for myself, so I don't even care. And that's like some deep stuff where you get an inside glimpse of how like tragic it was. And it wasn't just like, oh, you had to sit in the back of the bus. Like, people had to hover over empty seats. People had to give up their seat to young white men. You know, old black lady has to give up her seat for an old white man, and hold herself hovering above that chair, an empty seat if all of them were taken, until they got to their destination. And I feel like the atrocities and like the real dehumanizing way that the government was dealing with it has been covered up. It's been vaguely put out there that it's like that was so long ago, but it wasn't so long ago, and people don't understand that. So I just thought that reading this book would give me some clarification on where to go with that, and it did. It gave me a lot of like hope to see that like someone can definitely read this book and it could trigger something. So hopefully you read this book and it triggers something. Let me know what you think. Follow the blog, theeasyplaylist.com, and please subscribe, comment. My last channel got deleted. I was like about to be at my 1,000 monetized level, so please just subscribe and give me that like. Thank you.
On theeasyplaylist.com.